We're on 1 minute to go, guys, and then we'll kick off. Just letting a few more people in. One more minute, a couple more people. Right, guys, well, it's 7 o'clock, so I think we will kick the proceedings off for this evening. So I'd just like to welcome everybody tonight to our International Women's Day event here online, hosted by LitPR. Apologies from Helen Lewis, who's our director, who was hoping to be here this evening, but unfortunately she's poorly. So I'm stepping into her rather large shoes, and hopefully I'll do her justice. But I've got some wonderful authors with me here this evening. A lovely diverse group of very independent women who are really starting to make their mark in the literary world, some for the first time and some very experienced as well. So we've got a nice mix of ladies and also of genre of author as well. So I'm going to introduce you to each one of them, and they're going to tell you a tiny little bit about their book, their genre, and a couple of sentences about it, just so you sort of get a feel of the sort of writing that they do. And then we're going to ask them a few questions, some that have been sent in and some that we've sort of thought about the answers to ourselves and wanted to know. So hopefully you'll enjoy the evening. We're going to crack on with our first one. So I'm going to go to Lexi. If you wouldn't mind just unmuting and telling everybody a little bit about yourself.
Yep. Am I unmuted now?
You are.
Excellent. So my name is Lexi DeLorme. I write under LS DeLorme, but call me Lexi or whatever you want to. I have authored what is called I'm calling the Limerent universe. So far, I've released 2 books in this series. There will be 8. The first one was called Kaya. The second one is Bright Midnights, and there's a third one coming up in April. But the Bright Midnights one, I would describe it as, imagine for a second that you're 17 years old. And imagine at 17 years old, suddenly everyone is attracted to you and you have no control over this. This would not actually be a good thing. And that's what happens to my heroine. And there's a lot of it that comes into in terms of why she's that way, what happens to her, where it leads her. She finds her only friend in her own head. But then it turns out maybe he's not just in her own head.
Excellent. Well, I'm sure we can't wait to find out more about that, Lexi. Thank you very much indeed. Next, could I come on to WAFA, please? WAFA, would you like to introduce yourself and tell everybody about your beautiful books?
Thank you. My name is WAFA TARNOWSKA. I'm born in Lebanon, and I specialize in books about the Middle East, mainly for children or for children's parents if they want to read it with them, and teachers. I am very, very passionate of being a bridge between East and West, in the sense that I would like very much for the world to see the Middle East not in binary, stereotypical way, but in a more nuanced and real way. And so a lot of my books are about either ancient myths and legends that I'm trying to revive, or the last 2 books were about real people. So the Noor Secret Library is about some children in Syria who during 2016 war and it's still ongoing, unfortunately, the war, decided to pick up all the books that were spilling out of the bomb-out building and make a secret library in the basement. And it's a true story based in Syria, but it also is based on my love of books and on the fact that I'm a war child myself from the Lebanese civil war. The other one, which is a bit more appropriate for our discussion tonight, it's Amazing Women of the Middle East. And it's 25 women from the Middle East who have made a difference. And they're not just queens, and they're not just princesses. Some of them are just human rights, or a skater who skate with a hijab, or an astronaut who's originally from Iran, who decides to go to the space station and trains to become an astronaut. So really unusual women who I hope would kind of give ideas for young women that everything is possible if you work hard, and
breaking the
not to
mold,
take
absolutely.
their cultural, background too seriously.
Excellent. Well, I mean, absolutely incredible. Some of the women in there, and the stories behind it as well, which we can find out a little bit more about later. Ava, would you like to go next?
Hi, I'm Ava. I write contemporary fiction set in Cyprus, where my family is from and where I live. So my new book coming out on Friday is called 38 Days of Rain, and it follows Androula Dimitriou, who is 24 and newly married when she learns that she can't have children. And it's kind of about her exploration of womanhood and her identity.
Super. Thank you, Ava. And KSHAMTA, should we come to you next?
Can you hear me now?
We can, yes.
Hi, I'm KSHAMTA PUROHIT, and I have written my first novel, which belongs to speculative fiction genre. It's called Karma Saga's The Sangam. I believe in yoga and meditation a lot, and that's what's inspired the story. It is the story of a man who has to travel from London to the Himalayas to find an ancient book, and the world is ridden with climate change, so there are extreme weather events happening all over, and how he's helped in this journey with some special gurus. I've portrayed gurus. It's an Indian concept of teachers, like superheroes who have extraordinary powers. And it's also the story of his relationship with his sister and how everything is bound to a past life. So there are themes of reincarnation, yoga philosophy, a little bit of science fiction, and a sprinkling of spirituality. So that's why it's an experiment of merging different genres.
Beautiful, absolutely beautiful. Denise, would you like to go next? You just have to unmute yourself.
There we go.
There you go.
I'm Denise. I write murder mysteries for young adults. It's kind of a genre I've drifted into from a lifelong love of Stephen King and Sidney Sheldon and Agatha Christie, anything to do with murder, anything that's dark. I'm a single parent of 5 children as well, and I guess I kind of have spent my whole life, there's 18 years between my eldest child and my youngest, so I've kind of spent the whole of my adult life surrounded by children, and I guess that's the reason why I write for young adults. So I tend to deal with subjects like obsession and jealousy and family relationships. My second book was published last week. It's called It All Started With a Lie. It's about a 16-year-old Pearl who finds a newspaper clipping of her dad with a baby that he found abandoned outside a hospital around the time that Pearl was born. and she believes that the baby is her. And it just kind of sparks a whole domino effect of lies and family secrets.
Excellent. Thank you, Denise. Take my hat off to you, writing a book with 5 children around you. Oh my goodness, that just goes to show the power of women. And I think someone that can really appreciate that is our next guest, which is Carla, who has 2 lovely little boys and just has recently written her debut novel. So I'm going to pass over to you now, Carla.
Thank you so much. Okay, yes, I'm Carla Lauder, and I write sci-fi, dystopian sci-fi. My first novel is called The Quelling. It's part of a trilogy. The trilogy is also called The Quelling. And it's really about a young girl, Kita, who's living through a long-standing alien invasion. And she's quite vengeful. She thinks her stepfather has something to do with her mother's disappearance, and she's plotting revenge when she is stained by an alien fluid. And that experience means, or that event means that now she's prone to being taken by these aliens, and her body being basically used by them as a body, as a form to kind of interact with the universe and the world. And so that kind of sets her off on her journey from, being, I guess, a victim to then being eventually victorious, but also just moving her out of this state of being vengeful and rather into a state where she's thinking about other people and the greater good. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And our final lovely author that's joining us this evening is Linda ELSEGOOD. Hello, Linda.
Hi, how are you?
I'm all right, thank you. I've just asked the others to just give a quick introduction to themselves and their books, just a few sentences before we get into the sort of questions of the evening. So if you'd like to just give yourself a nice introduction, tell everybody what you write about and why.
Okay. Well, my name's Linda ELSEGOOD. I have multiple sclerosis, and I set up a charity back in 2004 to help people with autoimmune diseases, cancers, etc. And I've been privileged to have met some amazing doctors, researchers, pharmacists around the world. And I was approached in 2015 by a publishing company who asked me to write a book on LDN. She thought I was the right person. I knew LDN inside and out by that time. And I was like, no, I can't write a book. No, I wouldn't know where to start to write a book. Well, this publisher, she owned the publishing company, was very, very persuasive. And when I'd finished talking to her, I'd agreed to write a book. And I went into panic mode. Where do you start to write a book? I hadn't been planning to write a book. So it was then, I'm a list person, and I opened a spreadsheet and put down chapters that I'd want to see in a book. And then I got these amazing doctors and so on, multiple authors in the book to help me write this book. And it's been amazing. I mean, the first book was in 2016, and we'd sold over 30,000 copies last year. But it's a very niche market, so it's not the general public. It's being used as like a Bible for medical professionals. And we're now, that was LDN book 1, we've got book 2, book 3, we've had a 15th anniversary book, and in June this year our 20th anniversary book comes out, and it does get easier as you go along.
Well, I think it's brilliant that you're here as well, because obviously, as you've just said, writing isn't something, or writing a book isn't something that's come sort of like naturally to you. It's not really been your passion as such, but what has been your passion is obviously the topic of the book itself. So it's also really good to know it's just your determination to get that out there, and the fact that you just don't give up on research. again, is a very sort of female orientated trait, I think. So thank you very much, ladies. I hope all our guests are really looking forward to hearing some of the answers you've got to some of these questions that we're going to go into now. But obviously, if anybody has any questions with regards to you know, our authors and their wonderful books and topics that they cover, please do feel free to, we're going to have a Q&A at the end. Hopefully, if we have time, you can ask some questions at the end. So I'm going to zoom right in now to one of our first questions that we have to put to our authors, and that is, if there was one piece of advice that you could perhaps give to an 18-year-old, it could be a life lesson, it could be something that's applicable specifically to writing, or just generally in life, what would that advice be? So who should we go for that first? Should we ask Ava to answer that one for us first?
So I think I'd probably tell my 18-year-old self, in terms of writing, to ignore everybody else's opinion. Because when you say that's what you want to pursue from an earlier age, which I always did, everyone kind of says, yeah, but you know, is that really a career? Is that really something that you can pursue, you know, without having a backup plan or studying something else that's more practical, you know? And I think it's really
backup plan always comes into play, that conversation, doesn't it?
Yeah, every
That's
time.
why they almost think it's not a real job for you to be a writer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think it's really easy to get kind of caught up in the negative voices when actually it's the last thing you need, when it's already a really, really hard thing to pursue.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for that. Carla, would you like to jump in on that as well?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, I actually think for me, I would encourage myself to learn to plot as quickly as possible. It's something that I didn't do. I spent a lot of time writing prose and just kind of going with the flow, trying to just kind of imagining the story would just flow out of me. But I think actually every story has a spine. It's just like a human has a spine. If you don't have a spine, it's quite lifeless. So you need something like a template. Maybe you don't stick to it too strongly, but if you have this kind of plot template to guide you, and then you string your story onto that plot template, then it actually means that you save a lot of time in the writing process. When I'm writing, I spend about a month just sort of templating out my plot, or at least putting my plot into a template. And then after that, I start writing, and then the writing is just so much faster. Because you don't suffer from things like writer's block, and you always have a direction. You always know where you're going. So I use Blake Snyder's beat sheet, which is actually developed for film, but can very easily be adapted to fictional novels. And I find for me that's meant a great deal of time saving, and I think that's something we all need.
Excellent. Well, obviously, if there's any aspiring writers on here tonight as well, so obviously the use of actually the fact that there are these templates available to them is brilliant advice. So thank you very much indeed. Denise, would you like to go next on that one?
Right, my advice to 18-year-old me would actually be a life lesson, and it would be forgive yourself for the mistakes that you're going to make, for all the things that you're going to get wrong. And that's something I've found very hard to do over the years. Like anybody, I've made lots of mistakes along the way. I've clung to relationships that weren't working, and been involved with people that were no good for me. And my dad set the bar very high when I was a child, and I always felt that I needed to be perfect. And you can ask any of my children, I'm so competitive. I still am, even now. But the one thing I have learned along the way is that 18-year-old you is not the only version of you. There are so many versions of me that I've had to be along the way to survive. And none of them are perfect, but they're all me. And after I thought about this, I actually saw a quote by Nikita Gill a few days ago that kind of sums up this life lesson. And it was, "The ghosts of all the women you used to be are proud of who you have become." And for
Wow.
me, that is the biggest lesson I could give to any of my daughters. I've got 4 daughters, and yeah, we've been through a lot together, and that's what I would tell all of them.
Brilliant. Well, I think that quote is pretty spot on, really,
Yeah.
for anybody, but particularly females, because I think we are, you know, our sex are the ones that tend to go through so many different aspects of life changes
Yeah.
over the years. And I think, you know, every situation that you go through as well is sort of like is celebrating where you've come from. So, you know, the ghost, it's not like leaving the ghost behind, but it's almost like shedding that skin and moving into a new one, but
Yeah.
never forgetting that that one was there. So I love that quote. So thank you very much for that, Denise. Linda, would you like to go next?
Okay, I think we're all on the same kind of theme here. I would say, don't let people tell you you can't do something. Believe in yourself. That is so important. You know, you can achieve so much. You know yourself better than anybody else. And, you know, if you're focused and you try hard, you, as this lady said, it may not be perfect, but you'll get there, you know.
Absolutely.
And it all starts with loving yourself. There will be so many people in life that will try and put you down, you know, but don't listen. Just, you know,
Absolutely.
respect
And
yourself,
definitely,
and you'll get there.
yeah. And obviously, you know, from your own sort of health struggles as well, you know, there are lots of people that, you know, for whatever reason would not have had the energy and the determination to do what you've done over the last few years. So yeah, I think that's a great bit of advice. Thank you very much. And WAFA, would you like to give us some insight there?
Yeah, I've always wanted to write. That's always been my dream in life. But my father, who was a poet and a lawyer, who used to wake up at 5 a.m. to write poetry, when I said to him, "Dad, I want to be a writer," he said, "Writing doesn't give you bread on the table." So that wasn't very encouraging. And then, you know, there is this voice that we have in our head, not just as writers, as human beings, I think, which is, "You're not good enough. You're not good enough. Whom do you think you are? You're not Beatrice Potter. You're not Enid Blyton." I've always wanted to write for children, so I'm just comparing with children's writers. And I think we should learn. I would teach that 18-year-old not to listen to that voice that I'm not good enough, because that voice just prolongs your beginning into writing and makes it a little bit more difficult. If we were encouraged to say, no, we all need to write. We should write. Writing is like breathing. We need to be able to write. Even if we don't publish, we should all write. Then it'll be so much easier for people to write. It's like breathing. Writing should be like breathing, allowed and encouraged.
Absolutely. And KSHAMTA, would you like to give us some sort of insight into what you might give a young 18-year-old in today's world, some advice?
Yes, so I would like to say, believe in your ability to multitask. So when I was younger, I was told that I'll have to choose between science and creative writing. And I did choose at that point, but I couldn't let go of what I wanted to do. And aren't we all multitasking all the time anyway? You can
sure
have,
are.
yeah, if we can be a cook, a mom, a cleaner, you know, and so many other things, why can't we also be a writer? If we want to do something, there'll be a time and an opportunity, and when it comes, we have to give it a go. I don't think we have to listen to those voices that tell us you can't do this or can't do that because there's only limited time and you are supposed to do this or supposed to do that. But we should always give things that we want to do a go. And it's, even if it is not for fame or recognition or anything else, it gives a lot of self-satisfaction and self-pride to even just have tried everything in life that we want to do.
Absolutely. I think a lot of it is it comes with confidence as well, isn't it? I'm sure we could all say if the confidence we perhaps have today we had at 18, wow, I mean, what even more formidable women we might be today. Well, thank you very, very much for that. And our guests, if you've got any questions on that section as well, you know, please just wait till the end when we have our Q&A session, and we can come in and bring as many of you in as possible. We're going to go on to our next question, which is all about sometimes when you experience challenges within the workplace because of our gender. So the question was, have you experienced any specific challenges or bias during your publishing careers due to the sort of gender inequality? If so, what happened and what would you like to see change as a result of that? Now, I know a couple of you are quite keen to answer this, so I'm going to come to you first, Lexi.
There, I'm unmuted. Okay, so I actually have a story that I would like to tell about this, and I would actually love to get people's responses to it. So one of the things I discovered in putting out the first book that I put out, which is called Kaya. So I need to give you a little bit what the book's about so you understand. So this book is about two people. One of them is a boy who in 1905 was thrown into a hole in Brazil to die. And then later in our current day, a female lawyer in her 40s, or was a lawyer in her 40s, sees this same kid on the basketball court. So he's actually 137 years old, but he doesn't age. And this is about kind of their relationship, what happens with them, what happens in her law firm. And it's my discussion of how time affects us as people. Each of my books has a big overall theme. This one is time, how we move through time, the difference between spiritual age, emotional age, physical age. What would that mean if that is removed? So I thought this is kind of, kind of a cool thing, right? What I discovered is this was actually controversial. And it was controversial because I was being controversial as a female. So as a female, we're told don't upset people. Don't talk about things people don't want to talk about. Don't put yourself out there in a way that might be considered negative. People might think something bad about you. And I got a lot of these kind of comments over the way, and I'm going, this is A, this is fiction, and B, there's a lot of, like, even if you want to say something bad about the characters, there's a lot of bad characters in work. I mean, I had one guy tell me, but that would be illegal. I was like, The Godfather? Right? Like there's a lot of characters, and this is not a negative character. So the interesting conversation that I had with someone that I just really found incredibly perplexing. My whole family is very much involved in the publishing process with us. So I went to meetings to talk to publishers and stuff with my family. So I was sitting with my then 14-year-old son, talking to a guy who was a publisher. And he said, oh, we can't publish this book. And I said, well, I'm not really asking you to publish. I'm just looking for people. I wanted to do it myself, but I'm just looking to get opinions about this. He goes, well, my problem, it's not really the age difference. And I was like, well, there is the age difference between 40 and 137, right? He was like, no, but the other, it's like the appearance of age difference, that doesn't really bother me. And I said, okay, what bothers you? And he said, what bothers me is it's unbecoming for women in their 40s to still have sexual feelings. Wait, let that sink in for a minute. Unbecoming for us to still have sexual feelings in our 40s. I asked him, so how old are you? 40. Do you have a partner? Yes. And I just sat there waiting. I said, you do realize that you said the inside part out loud. And he was like, just completely without any shame, anything about this. And that the fact that he didn't know not to even say that, I found absolutely horrifying. you know? So I don't know if anybody else has had that kind of experience or things that are just so in your face. But the thing that did, my son is rubbing me behind my back, you know, like, please, mom, don't kill him. Please, mom, don't kill him. But we still run into these things that are just blatant. First off, would a male author even get any of that? And the fact that it's said out loud, and then I'm supposed to be people pleasing and, oh, nice about it, and, you know, all that sort of thing. And I'm not supposed to upset people. Like, no, I want people to think. I want to write things that makes people think. What I write has multiple layers in it. And one of them is examine yourself. If you can't look at yourself and say, what would I do in those circumstances, then I'm not doing my job. So that was a somewhat vivid example.
Wow. Well, clearly he has a young partner because he doesn't realise that we all come into our own from 40 and over.
Yep.
Let me say, but yeah, that is incredibly shocking. And I know there was a couple of comments in the chats come up that was sort of like, what? So yeah, I think that was thankfully, hopefully, in the minority of people, should we say? But it's sad that it does still exist out there, I guess. It's
the other interesting thing I would say about it is those type of comments, that's not the only one I've had, have all come out of the US, not out of the UK, not out of France. I live in France. It's come out of the US. So that's an interesting cultural phenomenon too.
So, well, yeah, thank you for that. And again, any feedback and any questions we'll take on that at the end. So I'm sure there'll be some on that, that's for sure. And Ava, you were going to have some feedback on that as well, weren't you?
Yeah, so I didn't have anything quite that blatant in the publishing industry. But I did get an agent when I was 19. I wrote my first book, which is not published, thankfully. No one needed to be subject to that in retrospect. But I found that I would write something and I would put it to this agent that I had at the time. And her comments were always from that first book, kind of, you're a really good writer, you know, you do have a future in this, but this isn't the story because it's too different. And I don't know what we would see it on a shelf next to, basically. And so it's not commercially viable. And then the conversation would move on and I'd kind of think, okay, well, I'll try something else. I'll start again. And we'd talk about what we were reading and what else was going on in the industry and things. And I kind of started to notice this pattern where if it was a male writer who was doing something really unique and kind of bold and new, those were exactly the words that would be used. It would be like, well, you know, he's heralding a new, you know, kind of age in the novel and things like that. And if it was a woman, not specifically me, I guess, but anyone, I don't hear that kind of thing said so much. It's more like, well, I just don't really know what we would do with you, as opposed to this is bold and interesting. And so, yeah, I think being indie as well, coming off the back of that, it's really nice to not be kind of held to that stuff and have more creative control. But yeah, I really did notice a difference in that.
Yeah, so almost like they weren't really necessarily taking you as a young female writer as seriously as they would have taken a young male writer, or were less worried about potentially putting, you know, a man off than over than, you know, more and above yourself.
Yeah.
Is there any of the other authors that would like to say something on there? No, we good? Okay, well, we'll move on to our third question, and then we're going to open up to a little bit of a Q&A. So as indie authors or self-published or indie published, what are your perceptions of the big five traditional publishers, as we would call them, in terms of gender equality and diversity and inclusion on a much wider level? You know, the second part of that question is really, I think, Ava, you've just sort of said as well, are you proud to be part of that indie sort of culture? And what does that stand for in your mind? You mentioned obviously the fact that you have much more freedom, you're not sort of bound by as many rules. Maybe you can be a little bit more innovative in that. But yeah, it's just interesting to get your perceptions of the big five publishers versus your experience in terms of equality and diversity and inclusion as to what you do now. We'll open that one up. We'll start with Denise on that one, if that's okay.
Okay. So obviously my imagination was running overtime when the question was, what's your perception of the big five publishers? So I've had a little bit of interaction with authors who are published by one of the big five. It's, from what I've seen personally, it's a very close-knit community. So you see the same authors attend all the big events in London, Manchester, wherever. So yeah, letting my imagination run wild. This is the best way I can describe my perception of it, is if you picture a Dickensian bookshop, it's all lit up, you've got a man standing in the doorway with his velvet jacket and his cravat and his starched shirt, and he's welcoming in all the middle class and upper class people that he knows from the gentleman's club or wherever. That's my perception of the big five. I would use the word snobby, and I know I shouldn't, but I think that there is a little bit of that still in the publishing industry. Whereas indie publishers, indie authors are the bookshops that are cozy. They're the ones where the doors are always open and anybody can come in and sit by the fire and pick up a book and everyone's welcome. So that's my perception of the difference between the big five and indie publishers. And yes, I'm very proud to be published by #Press, with all the work that they do, like pushing diversity and inclusion. And yeah, I find that my first book, I spent years trying to get it published, and it wasn't until #Press came along and read my book about a very flawed teenager, and they saw something in it that obviously agents and the big five publishers just didn't see. And yeah, that is the difference to me. There are so many amazing authors out there that will never get a chance to be published because they've been told, as we've already discussed tonight, that if you're not published traditionally, then what's the point? That's the way it's looked at, isn't it, most of the time. A lot of people probably don't have the confidence to self-publish either. And there are so many amazing authors I've met when I've attended courses and writers' retreats, and yeah, that to me is the big five are about profits, whereas indie publishers are about getting good work out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's a brilliant analogy. Thank you. I love the bookshop analogy. And as you were saying that, the thing kept popping into my mind was the scene from Pretty Woman with Julia Roberts going into that Beverly Hills shop, and it's almost like indie authors are Julia Roberts trying to get into that that Beverly Hills shop with the big five, if you like, and being told to do one, and then actually then going back to a certain extent, doing their own thing. And my God, one day you guys might actually walk into one of the big fives and go, see, big mistake. You never know. Thank you for that, Denise. So we will ask Carla to take that one next, if that's okay.
Sure, thanks, Diana. So I guess I haven't had any direct interaction with the big five. I would just say that, like, considering the lack of diversity and the sort of discrepancy between male and sort of female, the glass ceiling, all of that in other industries, I think we're quite lucky as women in publishing, because I think that you know, the number of women in this industry is incredible. So that I guess is encouraging. I find it encouraging. And I do find that, you know, whenever I'm looking on Twitter or wherever it is, and these agents are saying, what do I want? You know, what do I need? It's always, they always want something diverse. Like they're never asking for, you know, oh, I want, you know, another standard this. They're like, I want this kind of diverse thing, this kind of diverse thing. So I feel like almost like publishing is pushing the diversity agenda in a way that, you know, other industries just are not. So I do find that quite encouraging. And aside from that, kind of taking the indie publishing question separately, yeah, I mean, I find, because I have a big day job, you know, and I have the 2 kids, so I don't have a lot of time. And I think for me, going back to time again, the great thing about being indie published is I'm working to my own plan. I don't have anyone sort of breathing down my neck or putting pressure on me. I don't need more pressure in my life. I write because I love it. I wake up at 5 a.m. every morning. I sit down and write, because if I don't write, I go crazy. So for me, I don't need that pressure to make me write. I want to be able to do things at my speed, and I want to be able to do them my way. And I feel so incredibly blessed to be living in a time when this indie publishing is so accessible. I can't imagine living, you know, years ago when you've written something and you love it and you want to get it out there and you've got no avenue and you're just knocking on door after door, you know, please, could you look at my book? Please, could you publish my book? Here we have power. You know, we want to publish our book, we just do it. And I think that's fantastic.
Well, no, that's brilliant. And I think that is one of the really big things with regards to sort of working to your own timescales as well. And your own flexibilities, because, you know, you can swap and change things as and when you need to or want to. So yeah, I think that's a really good benefit that you've picked up on there, and it's growing all the time. And it does seem to be a rather female-led industry, which is all the better. So thank you very much for that, Carla. WAFA, would you like to go next?
I never even thought of the 5 big ones. They weren't even on my radar. I was very, very happy and grateful that I have found indie publishers that liked my work. I worked with now 3-4 different publishers, and my last 2 publishers have been utterly amazing and encouraging and wanting more of the stuff that I do. So I don't have a big 5 envy, let's say. It's like, you know, I don't need that Dior bag. I don't need that Yves Saint Laurent, whatever. I'm quite happy with my little, you know, handmade, more soulful kind of thing. So I don't have that. I'd love to be published by a huge, big publisher. Actually, one of my books has been translated by Hachette, but I super grateful for the indie publishing industry, super grateful for their diversity, inclusion, openness, ready to take risks. I love the fact that they are ready to take risks with us who come from such various backgrounds.
Good, lovely. Another great champion for the indie publishers, and it's nice and refreshing actually to hear you say that actually, you know, you're not chasing that, you don't want that. You know, if it's you're happy with your slice of the cake, so to speak, and it's a very tasty cake, WAFA, may I say. We're going to come on now to Eva, if that's okay.
Yeah, so for the same question, sorry.
Yes, yeah.
I think I kind of gave part of my answer in what I said before, but I sort of presumed without really thinking about it when I was growing up that when I wrote a book, it would be traditionally published, I think, because that's kind of presented as the way to go. And I also had family that worked in traditional publishing as well. So that was kind of the example I saw. But then again, it just came to this thing of creative freedom for me, which when I had an agent and we were looking to go the trad route, I found that I was being pushed kind of more and more towards either crime or romance or a kind of strange combination. And I think because I was a much younger woman at the time, to be doing what I was doing, maybe people thought that I could be molded towards that, but actually I really wanted to do more character-driven work, and I just kept being told, you know, that's not commercially viable by people in the industry and, you know, towards big five kind of areas of it. And actually it's not true. It's what I found. There are plenty of people out there who really enjoy character-driven books, and that's who I've managed to find on my own. So I've actually been really glad to step away from it.
And you certainly have, in grand style, so to say. So next, KSHAMTA, would you like to go?
Yes, so I actually found myself in a sort of a situation. I have a mentor from past few years, and he's a well-known published author. And when I finished editing my first novel several times, and he said to me that you're now ready to be published, I did believe that I was. But when I applied to the high street brands, the known publishers in UK and in US, because my story is so, the context, the themes are quite Indian, and I have used a lot of Sanskrit words as well. I felt that there was a hesitance in even trying to understand, and then I thought the kind of responses I got, they just didn't know where to place this book, because it was a kind of experiment of fusing different genres by an Indian female, and I could sense it in their replies that they just didn't know what to do with it. And everybody said, oh, it's a very interesting concept. But then I thought it's not enough just being interesting. On the other hand, when I approached the publishers in India, I was told blatantly that this is a market only for well-known authors, and as a newcomer, you're not going to stand a chance.
Is that commercially viable? Again,
yes. Yes, so we understand your story, and we get that what you've used, and this is a very in thing in India to use, you know, ideas from spiritual stories and stuff. But it just, I was in two extremes, where one place I wasn't known at all, and the other place I think I was almost treated like an outsider, like, what are you talking about? Why have you combined science fiction with Indian spiritualism? So and
you're like, because I can.
And I thought, just read the whole thing, and people who have read have been surprised by it. So I just thought, unfortunately I didn't know anything about indie publishers. So all I knew was that I could self-publish it. So I just did a little bit of research, and I was so tired of the process that I just wanted to get it out there and just start writing again on my next book. So that's what I did. And I'm so thankful, because I just, you know, when I start something, I have to finish it and move on to the next step. And nothing else matters now. And I'm learning from every step that I'm taking on the way. So I think I'm just thankful to be where I am. I have no complaints, and everything is a learning. And a few years ago, I wouldn't have been able to even self-publish myself. And now everything is so accessible and available for people who really want to do it and who have the ability to write. So I just feel thankful that I am an indie author.
Excellent. I'm going to come to you, Lexi and Linda, in a second. I'm just going to do a quick sort of summary so far. We've sort of said things like the difference really for you guys is that you felt that it's basically that everybody's welcome. It doesn't matter, you know, where you're from, what size your budget is, you know, what you're writing about. Everyone's welcome. There's a real big swing for diversity and inclusion for everybody. There's creative freedom is very important as well. Working to your own sort of like time scales. You can be you. You're not told who you should or shouldn't be. You maintain your own voice amongst that. And basically, during this process, you're learning all the time. So if you then go on to do other books as well, it's all sort of valuable knowledge that you're gaining all the time. Do you have anything you want to add to that, Lexi?
Yes, I do. So I think for me, I love indie publishing. I think it's amazing, and largely because it's fun. In my life, I've always kind of been an outlier because I've been a military brat. We moved around and was never anywhere more than a couple of years. You were always the outsider perspective, and I kind of appreciate that perspective and I like it. But there are two things that kind of came to me. One of the reasons why I like this so much. I was in business. I did do law in a very big company. And what I saw in that is also what I see in the traditional publishers, which is there is a long line to get where you want to go. So there is agent trying to get an agent trying to get your book seen trying to get some of the budget for marketing, then trying to get yourself out there. Then there's a lot, and it's very long. And I'm actually very impatient as a person. And that's also not fun. Beating your head against a wall saying, please, somebody notice me, is just not very fun. Even if they do notice you, if they take you, your characters become their property. And as a recovering attorney, I didn't like this idea. So we actually made it a big family project. So we decided we would create our own publishing company, which we have. It's called Limerick Publishing. We decided that we wanted to work in a variety of different fields with these books. So my youngest son, who is 14 now and wants to be a filmmaker, he made the trailer for our, for this recent book. My middle son loves doing the blurbs. We're actually thinking about coming up with a video game this summer based on the book. So we have this project as something that's fun. And because we're doing it ourselves, I get to leave that as a legacy to my kids. So if they want to do something else with it, they can. So the process of being indie gives you power, gives you control over your own time, and allows you to make something of it that you want it to be, rather than playing by other people's rules.
Excellent. I like that. Thank you. Linda, is there anything you would like to say on that? We've got about 10 minutes in case we want to ask any questions at the end as well. Anything you want to add, Linda? You need to unmute if you can. No?
Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
The first two books I did were published by a publishing house, an indie publishing house, and the doctors and etc. that I got to help me write these chapters signed a waiver to say that they wouldn't have any royalties and that all the royalties would go to the charity. What they were very unhappy about was the fact that the copyright was given to the publishers, that we didn't own the book. So, for example, they wanted to translate it into German. We couldn't say, yes, you can. It had to be done by the publisher. So the last book we published ourselves, and this book that's coming out, we're publishing ourselves. And it's quite an eye-opener, the steps that you have to go through to get a book published. I'm sure that all you authors know more about publishing books than I did. But I must say, I had to learn quickly.
Absolutely.
And how you can make a living from books when you have to pay all the shipping costs and the packing and warehousing and the printing, which is, you'd think would be a big chunk, but it's not really. It's getting a book printed is not that expensive. But how many books do you need to be out there? I mean, the money goes to the charity. I don't get it, so it doesn't make any difference to me. I don't have to have that as a living. But how many books do you need out there to actually make a living as an author?
Well, my gosh, that's the question, isn't it? I think that better be a question for another night, to be honest, because I think it depends on so many different things. I've literally just got 5 minutes, and I know somebody did put a question in the chat, so I'm going to ask that, and I've got a couple that's come through on Messenger. So the first question was about social media. How can books compete with social media and other media in today's world? Is there anyone in particular that would like to take that from our authors?
I'll take it.
Go on then, Lexi.
So I think it's, well, for me, looking at it as being books as being competitive to these other media, I think is the natural thing to do, but it doesn't have to be. So I was at the BFI Film Festival recently. It's for the younger kids, for the young filmmakers. And a woman spoke there talking about the use of video games to sell your book, like people actually creating video games that they use to develop their book. And some of the very big movies that came out, it did that. So the idea that it takes away from us, maybe, but we can also use it to enhance what we're doing and to enhance the way that we interact with our readers. When we were all young, we read books, and it was like those scenes appeared in our heads, and I think we were more connected. For Gen Z and Alpha, they're more used to having to, not feel, they can't imagine it as well, I think, as we can. But that's why video games are so popular. It allows them to actually be in a world and interact with that world. And that's why that area is expanding. And so if we as authors can find ways to do our storytelling in these other venues, and that's just one example. So I think it's because of indie publishing, because of everything that's expanding right now with the tech, it's actually a gigantic playing field for us to step into.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Anybody else want to add anything on social media?
Yeah, I think just to add to that as well, and I agree, yeah, the social media is a distraction, and maybe people were more prone to reading in the past. But I also think that in a way, social media has helped, because for a big group of people, social media has made reading cool. So if you look on Instagram, etc., it's all about, like, how many books have I read this month? And they're doing read-alongs, and they're constantly promoting their favorite books. And so I think exactly as Lexi said, like you can use these different modes of communication these days to help to promote your book, just as much as, yes, it's detracting from people's time and giving them less reading time.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. So what's the time? How we're doing? We've got a few more minutes. I'm really sorry. I think a couple of people have only just pretty much joined us. I don't know why you weren't flagging up as being let in. So this is being recorded, and it will go onto YouTube, so you can catch up if for those of you that have sort of like missed most of the session, unfortunately. I think there was 2 people I've just let in, well, about 10 minutes ago. So one of the questions that we've had in as a direct message is for children and for young people who don't necessarily enjoy reading, what advice would you give them, and how would you inspire them to give reading another try? I'm going to chuck that one over to WAFA first, for obvious reasons.
Storytelling is the way you engage young kids into reading. I mean, in addition to being a writer, I try to be a storyteller. I think everybody loves a story. They don't have to read it. Some people like to listen to it. So you get them to listen to something, you get a good storyteller to reenact, there's so many ways to interest children in a story. I mean, at the end, reading a book is listening to a story or getting a story. So it doesn't have to be just the page, I just think. And maybe, I don't know, with Audible, I just find that more and more, it's kind of being very practical. It's like, is there an Audible thing for children that you can just put something like where they're having a bath, listen to it or something, if mothers
Yeah.
doesn't have time or fathers.
Yeah.
So I think there are ways. It's all about stories at the end. So the way you tell it, whether it's from the pages of a book, it's from Audible or from your teacher or from a storyteller, that is what makes us grow, is to listen to the story, learn something from it, imagine yourself in the place of the hero or heroine, and ask yourself, what would I do?
Absolutely. I think I'm really good at that, actually, because it takes me forever to read a book, because I pretty much have to act out every single character in every single scene rather than speed read. But you know, hey ho, it's the only way to read, in my opinion. Denise, I'm going to chuck that question at you as well. Obviously, you write for young adults, but having 5 children yourself, you know, are they all avid readers? Maybe they're not, and if so, how would you encourage young kids to fall back in love with reading?
Yes, all 5 of my children love books. Maybe that's because they're my children and I've got a house full of books. I don't know. My son, he's my eldest, when he was at senior school, he received awards every year for being the child that read the most books.
Lovely.
I think it's Neil Gaiman, very famous author, is quoted as saying, if a child doesn't like reading, it's because they haven't found the right book. So I think it's a case of finding out what your child is most interested in, finding a passion, igniting that passion. And if you do that through films or theatre, as WAFA said, any kind of storytelling, if you can find that passion, then they will fall in love with the books.
As they get a little bit older as well, I think it's about finding the genre for them, isn't it? Which falls into that category of, you know, they haven't found the right book. Once they find a type of book they like, then that can very often reignite. So it looks like we have run out of time. We are at that 8 o'clock mark. So firstly, I'd just like to thank all of you, Eva, Wafa, Lexi, KSHAMTA, Denise, Linda. Thank you very, very much indeed for inspiring us all tonight. I've had a lovely message from one of our guests this evening who said, thank you so much for a brilliant session. Keep inspiring. So I will leave it at that. You are all very inspirational women, and just carry on doing what you're doing. And thank you very, very much. As I say, the session has been recorded, so it will be going live on YouTube for you to watch. Also, we are running an online competition for our guests. If you have, if you want to win a lovely book bundle of wonderful books, then watch out on our socials. You can apply on there. And yes, thank you very, very much for joining us, ladies. Take care.
Thank you, Dana.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.